It's wonderful to be here with all of you. Last year we did this also on Zoom, and it felt totally overwhelming and sad, and just, we were sort of, I think, trying to make the best of a challenging situation. And now, frankly, we find ourselves in a much, I think, I keep saying to people that Pesach this year has come at such an interesting time, because as our American society at the least, because we're all here celebrating that, thank God, so many people have been able to get the vaccine. But maybe not everyone is fully vaccinated, right? You have to wait for the 2 weeks and the 2 shots and all that. And there are others who it's going to take another couple months before they're able to get vaccinated. And so Pesach is just coming in the middle of this like liminal time, as we're in a period of what we hope is a transition, right? And not a setback with the variants, et cetera. We remain hopeful that this is our transition from a pandemic out of a pandemic. Now, when I was thinking of the topic for my pre-Purim shir, that was when a lot of us were hitting our COVID walls, right? And I would see on Facebook, everyone is just like depressed, done. And so in thinking about a Shabbat HaGadol drasha, you want to prepare a little bit. I was like, okay, I always want to, if anyone's taking the energy to call in at night, I want to make sure that it's something that also connects to where we are. It just feels like this isn't the time for just, Torah that's unattached to the goings on around us. And I was like, okay, so what time are we in right now? A couple weeks ago, I think we were still in this pandemic wall stage. And some people might be, right? I can only speak for myself and what I sense from just talking to people and watching Facebook posts, et cetera. But to see that the vaccine is coming so fast, I think my sense is that we're starting to turn a corner and feel a little bit more hopeful, and that there are some people who, are still having Pesach alone, and that it's terrible and a tragedy. And I'm so sorry that that's happening again with another 3-day yontiv. But there are some who are starting to be able to celebrate with family a little bit, not fully this way we would, but a little bit. And so in thinking about, okay, what speaks to this moment, I was thinking about Moshe and the Israelites when they're at the sea that has not yet split, and they see the Egyptians coming behind them, and the feeling of despair and panic that it causes. And so again, that was already a couple weeks ago when it felt like we were in more dire situation, but actually thinking and like reflecting the material, realize, I actually think that this is really connected still to the place where we're at today. So that's what I wanted to look at. Now, the connection that this actually has to the Haggadah, as I mentioned in the flyer, I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to bop back and forth between sharing my screen. I still haven't figured out a perfect system for this, but I want to just look at the sources together. So we might be familiar with them from the Seder. This comes pretty late in the Seder after our discussion of the plagues, right? Dam Tzvardeya, and you do the dip, and then, and then the acronym. And then we have these 3 midrashim that kind of get thrown in there about all these like crazy calculations about the number of plagues that there were at the sea. And some of us might say like, whoa, what's going on here? This is like classic rabbinics, right? What happened? And then you transition into Hallel, like, or Dayenu, like, okay, whatever, fine. And don't really think that much about them. But this year, I was thinking about, okay, connected to that moment of panic at the sea, which we'll look at in greater detail, is really these 3 midrashim that get stuck in there. And we won't do them all inside in detail, just because I really try to keep things to like 45 minutes. I found that I think I wilt after the 45-minute mark, and I've noticed that other people do too, so I'm just gonna try to keep it tight. So the first we have Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says, how do you know that the Egyptians were struck with 10 plagues in Egypt and then 50 at the sea? And then they say, well, the pasuk says in Egypt, et the Hartumim, the magicians say, etzba Elohim, right? This is the finger of God. And then at the crossing of the sea, it says, Vayar Yisrael et hayad hagdola, that Israel saw God's hand. So if in Egypt, 1 finger was 10, then mathematically that means that 1 hand is 50. But we don't stop there. That's the first section. Rabbi Eliezer, then, using different psukim, gets us to the place where in Egypt, they were struck with 40 plagues. And then the sea, at the crossing of the sea, the Egyptians were struck by 200 plagues. And then Rabbi Akiva takes it further and says, nope, in Egypt, it was 50 plagues. And at the sea, it was 250 plagues. Now, this is kind of surprising to us both because, like, where do these numbers come from? But also because we don't talk about plagues at the sea, right? We think about the plagues as something that happened in Egypt and not at the sea. And so what motivated them to put this in there? Another interesting fact that I want to have in our minds as we learn this material tonight is that this midrash does not actually appear in the series of midrashim that are inserted into the Haggadah right before this. And also, they're sort of culled from the Midrash Rabbah, but they don't appear in the Tanhuma, which is a different Midrash that actually serves as the basis for a lot of the earlier parts of the Haggadah. And also, these Midrashim don't appear in the earlier versions of the Haggadah. They only show up later, which means that someone went very out of his way to find these Midrashim and stick them in there. In a situation which otherwise the crossing of the sea and the miracle of the crossing of the sea would otherwise have received minimal attention. I feel like I need to show you guys that currently at my feet, I have both a dog and a child picking at my toes. It's like 2020 in a nutshell. Hopefully they will leave us alone. It's just completely ridiculous. Okay, so that's the background that I wanted to look at. And with that, we're going to launch into what is the actual material that we're going to look at, because I want to look at this in more detail. Seriously, Coco and Ezra, stop. They can smell it when you're trying to get something done. They can just smell it on you. Okay, let me just correct my screen for a second. So what happens at the crossing of the sea? We'll review some of it in more detail, and some of it we'll just scroll through a little bit. Can folks see the screen decently enough that I shared? Yeah, okay. Tell me if you have any issues with it, and I'll just say it out loud also in case you're listening. So when they leave, Moshe says Hashem says to Moshe, okay, send the Israelites around. We're gonna go a different way. Paro's gonna go after them, because I'm going to stiffen Paro's heart, right? And through that, God says in verse 4, I'm going to gain glory through Paro. And all the Egyptians are going to know that I'm God. So Moshe is holding on to this piece of information, which is a very key piece of information, right? He's finally gotten them out of Egypt. And now God's like, oh, by the way, the whole army's going to chase after you. But don't worry, like I'll take care of it, right? So Moshe, we can imagine, might already be in a place where either there are a variety of options of reactions, right? Maybe he thinks this is great, or maybe he says like, oh God, we don't know. But he has this knowledge, but no one else does. And then in verse 5, as we see, that's exactly what happened. Paro was told the people have fled. He has a change of heart. They say, what have we done? So he takes his chariot and his 600 chariots and lots of officers with him, and they start chasing after the Israelites. Now we're going to scroll. Now, what happens in verse 10? The people are standing at the sea, and Paro draws near, and the Israelites caught sight of the Egyptians advancing upon them, and they get very scared, right? V'yir'u me'od, v'yitza'aku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem. Now, when we hear that they cried out to God, what kind of crying out might we expect that this is? You can just unmute yourself.
Fear and panic.
Okay, panic. Yeah, totally. And yeah. Anyone else want to add anything to that? I'm teaching. You cannot leave. You cannot bother me. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
It's the same word that was used after Makas Bechoros.
Mm-hmm.
When everyone died.
Okay. What do you make of that?
Really bad.
Yeah, that's an interesting, because there the death has already happened, and here they clearly think it's about to happen based on what they say in the next two verses. That's a great, interesting. So yeah, go ahead, Rena.
anticipation of something bad happening is often worse than the actual happening.
Yep. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself, right? Yep. 100%. So they cry out to God, but then they turn to Moshe and they say, Hami bli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim, right? Was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt? Is this not the thing that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us be, we will serve the Egyptians, for it's better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. So, what are the Israelites saying here to Moshe? In our own words.
They were more comfortable. They were comfortable where they were, and they don't know how to live where he's taking them. It's too frightening.
Yeah. There's a couple there actually I from my perspective, the content of 11 and 12 is actually different, right? If we look just at 11, what are they asking? What are they saying in 11? Why'd you take us out of Egypt? You could have just what?
You could have just told Hashem to make it all good right where we were.
Well, what do you mean make it all good? Do you mean kill us?
Well, we won't be slaves anymore, and we can have our own lives. And why do we have to escape and do all this wandering in order to be free? If your God is so great, if Hashem is so great, why do we have to do this?
Yeah.
I think that they're accusing Moshe of having made a big mistake. And in a way, there's something very Jewish about this. And it's kind of humorous, even though it's this moment of desperation. You mean there weren't any graves in Egypt?
Yep.
Yeah. I always see it the same way too. It's that Jewish hint of sarcastic humor in there. There weren't enough graves in Egypt. You had to bring us out here to die. I mean, you can just hear the inflection in there.
Yep. Chaim, what were you going to say?
I wonder if if someone has some trauma, it's hard for it to go away. They went through all these plagues where they saw the Egyptians getting the plagues and them not getting the plagues. So there should have been a certain level of confidence. Let's remember that in the beginning, Moshe came along and said, I'm going to save you. And what happened? Everything got worse. More bricks, less materials, more work. And now he says, I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry. Yeah, that's what you told us last time. Look what happened. So I wonder if there's some of that as well.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is also a little bit of what Chaim was just saying. Maybe the crying out to Hashem. Maybe they were screaming at Hashem the same way that now they're kind of turning and screaming essentially at Moshe. There doesn't seem to be any prayer component here. There doesn't seem to be, we're going to get through this, as he said, like you did the other 10 plagues. Right now, all they're thinking about isn't how they're going to survive in the wilderness, but they're going to die in the wilderness.
Right. And if we're going to just die right here, we should have just died in Egypt, right? Same thing. What's the difference? But then in 12, they add another layer to it. They say, didn't we tell you in Egypt that it's better for us to just be slaves in Egypt? Now, the commentaries point out that there's no actual record of this conversation happening, which is really interesting. If you look back, there is not a point where the Israelites say to Moshe, you know what, it's better for us to just stay here, which some of the commentaries then say means that there was a conversation, it just wasn't recorded, but now they're telling us it happened. Or maybe this is just a defense mechanism. I mean, my 5-year-old Ezra likes to say if something breaks or whatever, I told you, no. I'm like, no, you didn't, right? But it's your way of attempting to take control over the situation. But I think let's just remember that they have this twofold reaction. Then, so the people, I think we can agree, are like panicking, and also panicking in a way that is not, it's not necessarily a productive panic. Now, we can't necessarily blame them for that, right? But if you're Moshe, you're like, oh my God, they're yelling at me, right? Because we should just kill them in Egypt. You're not in a good place. And then, so how does Moshe respond? Moshe has this fascinating 2-verse response to them. So Moshe, Vayomer Moshe el ha'am, al tira'u, don't be afraid. Hityatzvu or u et Yeshuat Hashem asher yaseh lachem hayom. Ki asher reitem et Mitzrayim hayom, lo tosifu lirotam od ad olam. Hashem yilachem lachem va'atem tacharishun. So Moshe says to the people, don't be afraid, stand by, witness the deliverance that God's going to work for you today. The Egyptians that you're looking at right now, you're never going to see them again. God will battle for you. And then this great last 2 words, v'atem tacharishun, the JPS says, hold your peace, which is, it means you guys be quiet. Now we could go a lot into, is he saying, shut up? Or is he saying, you're going to be, spellbound, you're not even going to be able to talk? Is he going to say you're going to stop davening because you're going to realize? We don't know. Millions of ways to interpret this, but what kind of response is Moshe having? Like, the people are freaking out at him, and as a leader, how is he responding to the situation?
With calm.
Okay, with calm, right? Yeah.
You never noticed this before, but it's sort of uncharacteristic confidence.
Yes. Great.
And
yes.
Reassurance.
He's like sure of himself.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
We don't see him that way too often.
Yes. It's like, great. I mean, he just jumps in there and he totally, I think in his own way, takes control of the situation the best as he can. He's still Moshe, but this is, the best he can do.
Ruth, Maharat, can I ask you a question? And obviously, since you are screen share, I'm like trying to scroll up, but I can't.
I know.
Just habit. When Hashem first speaks to Moshe, I think it was in verse 10, Hashem was basically saying that the message is for the Egyptians, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a strange, so in order to show the Egyptians, who of course just went through the plagues and really experienced the plagues, then we just see how it freaks out the Jews. It seems like that's a weird way to give the message, or at least explain to us the message that was given to the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Just to change that perspective seems.
I don't have a great response to that other than the God of the Torah is a challenging one at times. That's the best I can offer right now. But yes, it's a great point, right? And I think that when we stop and look at these little scenes, these little exchanges, we gain a new appreciation of what was happening on the ground. So Moshe gives this great, sorry, Rena, I see hands.
Just quickly, this is a new conversation of being free people talking to a leader. Did they ever have a chance, the Jewish people, to talk to any leadership like that before, to complain to, did they complain to their foreman, to Pharaoh? This is the first use of their voice, so they have a comfort with Moshe, which probably, I guess it's a good thing. So Moshe has got to stand up and be a leader to people who are maybe too comfortable with him.
Yep. Well, it's such a good point. I was thinking about that too, because this comes right after all the commandments about Pesach, right? We've got this whole list, do this with the lamb and the blood and and they do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. No, but it's interesting. And then here this comes and now they're challenging. It's interesting dynamic for sure. Yeah. Okay. So then we have a great pasuk. Now I learned this specifically with Josie Silverberg and Sarah Gershman for Josie's bat mitzvah. And we spent so much time on this one pasuk because it's fascinating. So remember, Moshe says, Atem tacharishun, you guys will be silent. God's going to take care of it. What's the next pasuk? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ma titzak elai, daber el bnei Israel vayisau. So the Lord cried out to Moshe, or said, I read that wrong. Then the Lord said to Moshe, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. And then adds, and you're going to lift up your rod, hold out your arm over the sea and split it so that they can march into the sea on dry ground. And don't worry, I'll stiffen the hearts of the Egyptians so they chase after you, and then I'll gain my glory.
Isn't that what Moshe did?
Isn't that what Moshe what?
Moshe did not cry out to Hashem.
So what the question we have is, either something happened between 14 and 15 that the Torah is left out, right? That they're not telling us, or Moshe is kind of got this like dual thing going on. So what do you make? So first, before we address that, what do you make of God in 15? What tone do you think God is using here? Yeah,
I think he's, sorry.
So, no, I'm sorry. It's hard because I can't.
You want to raise hand?
You can do this. Tell the Israelites, to go forward. Be a leader.
Okay. Confident. Oh, interesting. So God coaching Moshe. Interesting. Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think he sounds like he's really irritated. Like, why are you crying out to me? I told you to hold your peace 5 seconds ago, and now you're crying out. So
well, right. So remember, so God at this point, Hashem has told Moshe, this thing's going to happen, right? Moshe then conveys to the people, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And then God says to Moshe, why are you crying out to me? And so some of the commentary say, Moshe was just, oh, don't worry. Moshe was just davening. And Hashem is saying, don't worry, you don't have to daven right now. It's time to act. Boom, 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 boom. So that's one option. Yeah.
I see it more the way Moshe struck the rock when he became impatient. Maybe he was agitated by then that God wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, or wasn't doing it fast enough, or I mean, if you're looking between 14 and 15, the water will battle for you. Hold your peace. And then
that's Moshe speaking to the people, conveying confidence.
And then something happened where Moshe must have cried out, right?
Well,
that's
right.
Missing, no?
Exactly. And so this sheds very interesting light into and I'm just curious for your thoughts. What is Moshe's actual headspace right now? What does 15 teach us? How does 15 modify what Moshe says in 13 and 14?
Well, it seems like in 13 and 14, Moshe, as people had mentioned before, was calm and was confident, whereas Hashem is clearly reacting to someone who isn't necessarily so calm and is in fact, crying out to Hashem.
Yeah.
So maybe Hashem can see, not maybe, Hashem can see inside how Moshe is really feeling. And that Moshe is feeling just like the people are. So Hashem is maybe responding to everybody, to the whole panic situation.
Yep.
I think in 13, Moshe is thinking that the people can be passive and stand by and let God do all the work. And what happens in 15 is like God saying, come on, get them to move. They have to move. I'll help them, but they need to take the first step.
Interesting. I also wondered if there's, sorry, was someone else speaking?
I was just going to add, that he's telling Moshe also that he can't just stand there waiting for God to do something. He has to take an action.
Right. I mean, it almost seems like God is starting to panic, right? In a way, God's like, stop talking, just do it, right? Like, what are you waiting for? Let's go. It's this sense of like Moshe's trying to convey confidence while everyone, even God, is actually kind of freaking out at this point, or at least knows it's time to move. And one thing that struck me about this Moshe this year is just like how many of us have at times felt like in our heads, we so are not holding it together, right? And then in various situations, whether it's parenting, friendships, teaching, I don't know, whatever, you just have to project like you're totally under control, when in your head you're like, so I like that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the screen share, because this way I can actually see everyone. Just 1 second, and that way I can also look at my notes for a moment. There's no perfect way to do this. I apologize. Yeah, and by the way, so like I said, a lot of the Mefarshim, they say, no, Moshe was just davening with the rest of the people, but he wasn't actually freaking out. The Ramban actually says, well, Moshe he was at a loss of what to do. Maybe he wasn't panicking, but he was at a loss of what to do. All he knows is that God has said, the bird's eye view of the plan. Moshe doesn't know the specifics, right? So Moshe's freaking out, maybe not freaking out that they're all about to die, but certainly freaking out, saying like, okay, what's the plan? Like, what's the plan? We need to know the plan. And that's why God responds, okay, stop yelling, like, here's the plan. And so I appreciated the Ramban's willingness to view this not as a moment of prayer to God, but really as emotional, more real moment of just total terror and chaos. Hence the title of the shir. And so, I guess I'm curious. Does anyone identify with any parts of this scene? Anyone struck by anything? Right? There's sort of like I see the three parties. There's the Israelites who have no control over the situation, have no idea what's going on. There's Moshe, who sort of has control over the situation and has to act as though he does. And then there's God, who knows what's going on, but is starting to get a little like annoyed at Moshe for not acting fast enough and for freaking out. I'm just curious, like, if any of this dynamic has resonated like at all with you over the past year or in general. Janet, I saw your hand.
Yeah, it seems to me God is saying to Moshe, why are you crying out? Take action, put your rod out. But he hasn't revealed to Moshe what to do, that the sea is going to split if he puts his rod out. So how is Moshe supposed to know that? It always puzzles me when I get to that.
Yep.
Because it's not like he was told ahead of time. So I think it's not clear.
Yeah.
The message is a little bit hidden, or a lot hidden, and I think that Moshe does know what to do. It's hidden inside, and Hashem is going to bring it on when it needs to be brought on. And that I do relate to that. There's times when I go into a situation and I think, I don't know what to do here. And when I get there, I know what to do. And I don't even know how I know what to do. My neighbors just adopted a Chihuahua. I didn't know I knew how to handle one. But I went over to try because they asked me to. And I thought, oh God, I had a lot of trepidation, but the experience is there. And Moshe's already feeling something for the people, maybe.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a great point. Like, what is Moshe's source of panic, right? Is it, this is going to be a catastrophic leadership failure on my part, right? We don't know. Is he panicking because he's saying, I told you, God, this was a terrible idea and that wasn't going to work, right? Is he panicking because he's as afraid for his life as the Israelites are? We don't know exactly.
Except if Hashem is in it all, he's going to bring it on. We don't have to really worry about it, because the answer will be revealed.
Yeah.
Except, sometimes God makes them work hard. Like they were crying out in Egypt for a while, and finally God listened. And then when they got to the desert and there wasn't any water, they had to cry out and complain. God didn't anticipate that they needed water. They had to ask for it. It's their training. When you're a slave, you don't ask for things because asking doesn't do you any good. And God is teaching them that, hey, you know what? Ask, either pray, do something, take the first step. You can take a certain amount of control and then I'll do the rest.
Interesting. Chaim, yeah, go ahead, Chaim.
When Moshe said, don't worry, God's got this, he's got your back, he's going to take care of it, what did he have in mind? Right?
I guess he assumed God's just done all these miracles in Egypt and taken them out, and God will figure something out.
So maybe the Matitzake lie is related to that, because he just told the people, don't worry, God's going to take care of it. And God says to him, well, don't cry out to me. It's true, I will take care of it, but as just said, go in the water.
Go do it. Yeah.
But that would definitely not be intuitive to probably either him or the people, right? That they would do that. First of all, they had another choice. The other choice was to turn around and fight the Egyptians, because either way could end very badly, but that would certainly be another choice. And at least that way they would have a really, pardon the pun, a fighting chance.
Yeah, although it is interesting that a few verses before, God says we have to steer them in a different direction lest they see war, right, and want to go back to Egypt. So yeah, they're not well equipped to fight, but yeah, maybe they technically could have.
So then,
and Moshe's
the Chamushim then is not armed, right?
Right. Yeah.
And Moshe's not really well equipped. Yeah, Moshe's not really well equipped to take the responsibility that Hashem is also asking of Moshe, because every time, Hashem did it all. So here, all of a sudden, this is really one of the first times when it's like, how does Moshe have any clue that Moshe is supposed to take that responsibility?
Yeah, this group of people desperately needs like an industrial psychologist. Yes, seriously, I'm not even kidding. Right? I mean, there's like such a lack of just understanding the other person's position, and that continues throughout the whole Torah. Yeah, Deborah.
He used his rod once before this, so he does have some experience of his rod being powerful. So if you see the sea about to split into two walls, or you see that happening, you lift your rod up,
right?
And it might be instinctive to just like extend yourself with the rod, and you become bigger. And he's done it before.
Yeah, that's a great. I like that. Also, I hadn't really thought of it, but this is the first time Moshe's only given vague instructions, right? But not specific instructions. And so now maybe he's waiting, and this is a growing point where God is like, no, do it. It's okay. Okay, so I'm just mindful of the time. So I just what I wanted to think specifically for Pesach this year, and in considering the midrashim that very intentionally got inserted into our Haggadah at some point, is appreciate what exactly then happens at the Red Sea. And I was thinking about that through the lens of the Israelites' reaction. They say, what, were there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die? Which to me is very different than, I don't want to die. To me, that's, why'd you bother going through the Exodus if you were just going to kill us here? You should have just killed us in Egypt. Which I think then forces us to pause and say, so then what exactly is upsetting them? In this particular, obviously, I think they would have been afraid to die. However, that's not how they choose to phrase it initially, right? The worst thing for them is not death. What's the worst thing for them?
To realize that was Hashem's plan for them.
Oh, interesting.
One way or the
That was
other.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like the whole plan was just to bring them to a dead end. I mean,
right
there they are at the Red Sea. So,
and what's so frustrating about that?
To die so close to freedom.
Right, to die so close to freedom, to taste that freedom and then lose it, right? It's better to have loved and lost than never have to loved at all. To me, that's kind of what I hear here as part of their panic or their frustration, right? Is you gave us that sense of hope and now you're taking it away from us.
Exactly.
We at least knew, we were mentally prepared to be slaves the rest of our lives, to die in Egypt, right? We knew what the end of our story was. You promised us a world that could be different and then took it away from us. And this, that resonated, I think, with me this year, it's been such a year of ups and downs of, a friend shared on Facebook a couple weeks ago that her status 1 year ago, that Facebook says like 1 year ago today, was something like, wow, how long is this, is quarantine gonna be able to last? How long are we going to be able to do it? 2 weeks, 4 weeks? What if we have to do it for 8 weeks? And she was like, ha ha, little did I know, right? 1 year later. And I think there've been a lot of ups and downs for us of moments of hope and then surges and things. And I just thought that it was just very interesting to see that then what the Israelites are most afraid of is that you gave us hope, you gave us that sense that things were going to get better, and then you took it away. Now, I'm not saying this to be grim, because of course what happens, they survive. And not only do they survive, they get to witness the Egyptians being hurled into the sea, right? I mean, this very intentional scene that God has created, right? God, it's a dramatic scene where God, makes the wheels stuck and then makes them all confused and then hurls them into the sea, right? It's very intentional. It is graphically violent. But clearly we see from Az Yashir Moshe Bnei Israel, right, that they sing right afterwards, this was something that they needed, right? This was a moment that was a catharsis for them, to soothe both, I think, their fears and some of their trauma from Egypt, and also enable them to witness that, like, and I think to also realize, oh, like God really is as awesome as we were told God is, right? And therefore, when we look at these three midrashim that get inserted into the Haggadah and think about why did someone go through so much effort to stick them in there? Well, because what it's saying is that whatever they experienced in Egypt, they experienced, fivefold, I forgot the math already, whatever fold, at the crossing of the sea. Because the crossing of the sea is when that fear really kicked in, that sense of despair really kicked in, that they hadn't even felt as strongly until now. And so then the freedom makes it all the more enjoyable, all the more of a relief, all the more cause of a celebration. And there's lots to say about what also another part of other additional things about the crossing of the sea, but for the sake of time, I wanted to just offer that as a thought, and then also as an interesting takeaway. And again, I say it not to be grim, I say it to be realistic. I think that, we right now as a community, as a society, we can analyze exactly which stage we're in if we compare the crossing of the sea to the pandemic. I mean, lahavdil, but in terms of the stages of panic and grief and loss of hope, etc. But certainly the redemption is on the horizon, and that's really, really exciting. And I just hope that humanity has the biggest worldwide party whenever this is able to be over, the equivalent of the Roaring 20s from 100 years ago. But also to remember, there's another lesson, an important lesson from the Torah as well, is that even though the Israelites and Moshe are able to unite in this moment of song, of full proclamation of God as being the ultimate, that trauma is still going to creep back in, right? They are going to reference Egypt again. They're going to say, oh, we miss Egypt. Wasn't it better? No. It creeps back in, which I think is an important message for us, that when trauma is created, when we go through suffering, whether as individuals or as a community, even once that suffering there's this redemption, no matter how grand, that doesn't just make it all go away. It's still going to be parts of us. And that, we should have our hope and our excitement for the end, but also be kind to ourselves and remember that may also have some lasting challenging effects as well. And I say that again, not to be grim, but to just, offer us that I think that assurance that it's okay for the feelings of whatever the end might be to be complicated as well. And so with that, I'm happy to stick around for comments, but I just wanted, before anyone signs off, I wanted to just, first of all, thank everyone for coming and take the opportunity to wish you a happy and healthy Pesach. And can't wait for us to continue to see each other more and more, hopefully in person.
And
yeah.
I noticed a interesting parallel to the vaccine in one of the commentaries on the Haggadah. This, I believe, is in Hegyone Halacha Haggadah. And, the symbol, one of the symbolisms of the egg at the Seder, he says, is that when a chick is born, it's a two-step process, like the two vaccine doses. First comes out the egg and then the chick. And, so it's a two-step process. And that's how we should see our redemption, as a two-step process. Really, the end game was getting the Torah, not just to get out. So step one was getting out of Mitzrayim, and step two, second dose, is getting the Torah. Now you're vaccinated, not before,
That's so interesting. That's cool. I like that. What if it's on mute? No. Okay. All right. Well, have a wonderful night, everybody.
Can't we just stay here and do the Seder?
Hang out. Yeah.
Without
Totally.
cooking.
I was gonna say, the last 48 hours, I've kind of felt this way in my kitchen.
In your what?
In your kitchen.
You know, halfway through the refrigerator, I'm like, nah,
Me too.
enough, enough. And then, oh yeah, yeah. It doesn't matter whether nobody else is gonna see it.
Yeah.
Those boxes piled up high.
And then you look up at the things that are up on the shelf and go, oh yeah, they need to be washed too.
Do they though?
No.
I don't know. It's the feeling of hummus, just.
Yeah.
But that feeling of, can I do it? Am I capable?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if I say, well, I've done the best I can, that's not the meaning of it. So
Right.
Well, it depends on how you're spending your time, Deborah. If you're not dusting on getting the chametz on the very top of the windowsills, up top windowsills, then maybe you have time to study a bit and prepare for the seders.
I like that. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Especially since it's chametz that you're never going to eat. If it's crumbs somewhere, it's like the dust of the earth. It's not.
It belongs to someone else anyway. It's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, one of the best Shabbos drushes I ever heard when I was a kid, like a teenager, was our rabbis told, I'm speaking to all the women here. I don't want you crawling around in the back of the closets looking for the chametz. He said, rest a bit so you can enjoy the seders.
Yeah.
This was Simcha Strauss when he was rabbi of Young Israel in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
A wonderful lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Janet, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you for bringing up this whole subject that you did tonight of this passage in the Haggadah, because to me, when I would come to it in the past, it was like, why is all this pilpul in here? What does it really have to do? Why did they put it in here? And you really illuminated it so nicely that I finally understand why that whole section is in the Haggadah. So thank you for enlightening me. I really appreciate it.
It was the first time I also always had that same reaction of like, all right, whatever, sure, 250, okay.
Yeah, I completely agree with Janet. I completely agree.
Oh, great.